Hey guys, thank you very much for coming today. Super excited to be here. My first time in Bucharest and Romania itself, but I've heard a lot of lovely things on my travels and from the organisers. So yeah, really pleased to be here and see the community grow. That's my role in general at Unity, is to come out and visit developers everywhere around Europe and the Middle East and see communities grow and help them out as much as we can. So feel free to come chat afterwards and see what we can do about helping Unity user groups, developer groups in general, or just you guys as studios and indies. So yeah. But today I'm here to talk about VR and Unity and Unity's commitment to the platforms of VR and AR and mixed reality, as people like to say now. And what we've done so far over the past 3 or 4 years, try to support the platform and what we're going to do in the future, and some of the best practices for developing VR and AR applications, things that I've seen and a lot of people have shared their experiences. So yeah, that's what we're going to go through. And this is me, I'm Josh. I'm a technical evangelist at Unity. So a lot of people think, what the hell is an evangelist? It sounds really churchy and preachy. And it's exactly that. I come out and preach to you guys about using Unity, and yeah, it's working so far. I've got a lot of developers, as I'm sure a lot. Who's a Unity developer in the crowd? Okay, great. Who's a game developer but not using Unity? Okay. Are you using own engines? Are you using Unreal? Are you using Game Maker? On technology, okay. That's actually, everyone comes and says, oh, what do you feel about Unity's competitors? It's actually own engine technology. I go around to different studios and try to say, is your own engine that good? Is Unity better? Come on, change over. So yeah, and that's my Twitter hashtag if you want, Twitter username if you want to message me. I'm normally traveling, so I reply back through Twitter much quicker than I do email, so I don't hand out my email that much. And I've just flew in from Kiev, where I was at a conference there, and the week before that I was somewhere else, and I'm going to Singapore next week, so everything to meet the Unity community. Yeah, and people like to say this is me. So I'm from the north of England, close to the wall, and people like to say that I know nothing. I've got a lot of wildling friends, and they like to take the piss about how I say grass and coke and goats, things like this. So I hope that I can speak clear enough for you guys to understand me. Most of the people I've met so far have got like amazing English, and they apologise to me for their English being so bad, and I know like no words in Romanian, so well done, thank you for accommodating to me. So yeah, it's 2016 and the year of VR, as everybody likes to say, but you have to be quick because the year is like nearly over. It's nearly Christmas, I guess. All the stores have all the Christmas stuff out already. It's not even Halloween yet. But yeah, so I think when people say this, and personally I do think it is the year of VR because there's so much journalism, there's so many developers, and there's so much word getting out there about the platform that the consumers actually know what it means now. Maybe 2 years ago, if you said to somebody randomly on the street, oh, what's VR? They'd be like, well, that sounds some crazy Matrix thing. Right now, if you actually ask them what VR is, they're like, oh yeah, it's them goggle things. So we're actually getting quite close. And with it being the year of VR, I think what it also means is that developers are jumping on board the platform. It's getting a lot more accessible now. You can actually buy headsets rather than being on a long waiting list. And the platforms are actually chucking out as many developer kits to every developer they can see because they want people to make amazing content. And that's exactly why I'm here, because I want to help people create amazing content for the platform. So yeah, it's a wonderful site. And this is what I get to see on a daily basis. So yeah, we've had a long running commitment to VR for quite some time really. And well over 3 years ago, David Helgeson, our CEO and founder, actually featured on the Oculus Kickstarter with many other leading tech industry people, including people from Epic. But yeah, it just showed that two of the biggest engines are really committed to VR. From there, we helped Oculus implement their SDK integration in Unity 4. And from there, we gave 3 or 4 months of Unity Pro to all Oculus developers, which was a big deal at the time because it was the free and pro feature split, which meant people couldn't develop for Oculus without Unity Pro. So yeah, anybody who bought an Oculus got Unity Pro and they could start developing straight away. And people forget like this was like 3 years ago. I watched the Oculus Kickstarter again like last week, and it's quite refreshing to see where it's coming that time. And yeah, it's really nice. So I'd urge you all to watch it again. Google Cardboard SDK integration in Unity 4. And what was amazing about this is, what I'll talk about later on as well, is that how accessible the Google Cardboard is. People can have any Android or iOS phone and slot it in, and they can give it to kids in a classroom, teachers, anybody at all in the street, rather than like the DK1s, DK2s. So it was not as accessible at the time. And then now this year, so we had Vision Summit, was a cross-industry VR conference in Hollywood in the beginning of the year. It was pretty amazing to attend. What was even better was in the keynote, Gabe Newell came on screen and gave everybody a Vive in the audience. And there's a guy in front of me, and he looked like he'd just won like $10 million. He was just screaming like how pleased he was, which was pretty amazing. And I was a bit scared of him after that. Native HMD integration with Oculus, PSVR, Vive, and Gear VR. So now it's basically you go into Unity, you tick a button saying, "Yep, I want virtual reality enabled," and all of those platforms are currently integrated. It's pretty amazing. The HMD anyway, not the input. But VR rendering pipeline improvements. So a huge thing in Unity 5.4, which we released maybe a month ago now. We rewrote a lot of our rendering pipeline to optimize VR rendering. And then we also implemented a thing called single pass rendering, which basically, instead of drawing the left eye and the right eye, so what happened was you have 2 render textures, you show the left eye and then you show the right eye. And there's so much latency in that because obviously you're rendering 2 different textures at different times. So now it's just one big texture rendered at the same time, and that's improved latency a lot. And SDK integration with HoloLens. So that shows our longer commitment to AR. And we announced like 2 days ago that we've released our technical preview for Daydream, which also means Google Cardboard as well. So yeah, that's coming in the future, available for developers right now. Yeah, in the future. So we're developing a new input system because the other one sucks really badly. Which will have dedicated VR input as well. So we're working with the various different platform holders, looking at what they have in their SDK or their utilities, and we're putting that into our VR input system. So we'll have most of the controllers, Vive, Touch, Move, and and then just general like tap and gears and things like that for VR. Further rendering techniques. So we have Unity Labs, which looks at kind of like what Unity can do in the future and a lot of R&D towards that. So our Paris team, headed up by Sébastien Lagarde, he previously worked on Frostbite engine. He basically invented like PBR shaders, which is pretty amazing. We've got him and a team in Paris looking at some amazing research at like the top of that field. And I think it shows like how far and how quickly we are in the games industry to move to the next biggest thing. I think so many different industries are so far behind in a lot of things, and that's why Unity are pushing into other areas such as film and animation, visualization, architecture, VizSim, not just games, so it's pretty amazing. Cross-platform improvements. Again, it's so that we can have the same SDK for every VR platform across the board, which is really important for developers. That's why you use Unity in general, because it's easy to get on 23, 24 platforms already. So why would you have to redo everything for different VR platforms? The VR editor, if you've not seen this already, it's a way to author your Unity scene with the actual HMD on. So you could bring in a tree into the world while you have the HMD on, and think, oh, that's not big enough, I'm going to scale it, I'm going to change it, I'm going to rotate. So you can actually build the world in VR with HMD on. and post-processing effects optimized for VR. So we've actually had these out on our global bit bucket for some time, and we'll be releasing these hopefully very soon. They're currently in like a closed beta. New post-processing effects, which is a big stack of post-processing effects, bloom, rendering, anti-aliasing, things like this. And yeah, so we're going to be optimizing this for VR as well. And then who knows? We're working on other secret things, which I can't speak about, and we're looking at where the industry is adapting to that stage, and we're going to be jumping on that first. So yeah. So like I said, you guys, game developers, use Unity because it's easy. It makes things easy. And when you click virtual reality enabled in the editor, this is what it does. So it extracts the VR platform depending what's attached. So if I've got a Vive plugged in, it will extract all of the APIs for the Vive. If I've got an Oculus plugged in, it does the same for this. And it allocates any graphics resources for rendering, again, depending on the platform, depending what's more important for that platform. It hijacks the Unity camera, targeting back buffer, so basically whatever camera is actually turned on and rendering the scene. And it updates the camera's local matrix. So obviously, you don't want your camera rotating off wherever. And say if it's a racing game, you don't want it following the car. You actually want it attached to the HMD and following the HMD's rotation. And then obviously updates the field of view. That's why Oculus was one of the best things ever to come out, even though we've had so many head-mounted displays before. There's the sheer field of view, which created more presence and immersion that matches our own eyes. And then handles image distortion, reprojection. Again, all of this would not be possible if you had to do it for every single platform independently. We've brought all these into one. So yeah, this is what I say so many times every single day to so many developers. It's you guys as developers can shape the future of any platform because that platform depends on amazing content. Why do I buy a Nintendo 3DS or the newest DS every time it comes out? Because I want to play on Zelda or I want to play Pokemon. Why do I buy an Xbox or why do I play a PlayStation? Because I want to play a Naughty Dog game. Because the developers make amazing content. So these people, when they're in the shop, they're going to see a Vive, they're going to see an Oculus, they're going to see a Gear VR, and I think, what is the best content for these? And that's made by you guys, the developers. And it's a brand new medium. So I like to show this to a lot of people. Everybody thinks they know how to develop, or they think, yeah, I know what works, and then they try it, and it doesn't, and it's shit. But that's one of the best things about the games industry, because people share so many of their experiences. There's a few talks on today saying, hey, we tried this, it didn't work, don't do that, try this instead. And I go to so many conferences with like enterprise and business to business, and people who are making VR demos for like automotive, and their developers are locked in a very dark room. It's very secretive, and they try some R&D stuff, they do some research, they try and make a prototype, it doesn't work, and then they scrap it and try something else, but they don't share what they've found with anybody else. The game industry is so open and nice and lovely, and you can speak to people, and they'll come up, stand on stage, give a really honest display and say, we did this, it sucked, we lost a bit of money, but then we're going on to something else now. And we was having long debates last night and at the speaker dinner about the same thing and how nice it is to be part of such a welcoming industry. So yeah, so the main thing, why do people play games? Why do people want to be even more immersed than they are now? Because of interactivity. And what exactly does that mean? And interactivity, the dictionary description is actually a two-way flow of information. So many people who develop games just say, oh yeah, I'm making this game because I love this type of game. But you're actually not making a game for yourself. You're actually making it for other people to play. Even if the target audience is your mum or your grandma, think about making a game for somebody else and thinking, how do they think? How do they work? How do they interpret what they see on the screen? And you need to give also them feedback through the game. So it's a two-way flow of information. So we've got 5 senses, or maybe some of you are superhuman, have got more. But I can see, hear, touch, taste, and smell. We're not quite there yet with the other 2, so I'm going to remove them. But When developing for VR, they kind of go in this order. So we see, and it's really easy to do. It's effective though. The player or the world doesn't exactly even need to move. You've just got your general stereoscopic view. Even static images work, and this is the same every single platform, from Google Cardboard, any mobile VR, all the way up to Oculus 5. But what a lot of people don't realize, what developers don't realize, is because they've seen this for 3 or 4 years. I tried DK1 maybe 3 years ago, and any VR experience now I want full immersion. I want to move. I want to touch things. I want to interact in every way. But I'm not the general audience. I'm not a general consumer. So we just need a general wow factor. When we look at this, I like to call this VR face. And if you look through when people play VR for the first time, they look up and their mouth goes. And the next thing they do is look where their hands are, and they don't see their hands. Or they look down, try to see their feet, and it's obviously not there. So even a 360 static image works. I took my Gear VR home to my mum and my sister and gave them this, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, I get to see the Grand Canyon, and I get to see an amazing waterfall. I get to go to Dubai just on a 360 image. And I was just like, you literally know nothing. Wait until you come to my house and play my Vive. But again, they're just the general consumer. They've never experienced this before. It's giving them a wow factor and a nice introductory to VR. The next thing, hearing, audio. I mean, it's pretty easy to do. We've been doing this in games for some time, but so many people with their VR experiences are not including audio. They just give someone a Gear VR and they don't plug in the speakers or anything. And having that 3D spatial audio and having a kind of Doppler effect, even a car going from left to right and hearing it go, and you get people looking around and trying to figure out where it's coming from or where it's headed to. And it just gives a great sense of immersion and a presence. And again, every single VR platform is the same. So it's not as though you have to do a load of extra work for different platforms. It's really, really easy to do. But the hardest thing, really, really hard, but it's the best form of immersion, is touch and interacting with the objects around us and getting feedback off them because we're doing something to them. Movement, and the biggest thing is we actually learn when we do. So if somebody's entered into your VR world and they look down and they see a gun on the floor, for example, and you point something at it and it turns like a blooming effect, and you pull the trigger and it shoots to your hand. You're like, oh, wow, okay, that's how I pick up things. And they never have to be taught that again because they've done it once and they've done that action. They don't have to be taught that ever again. But yeah, it's different on every platform, and that's a very hard thing to do. So how do we actually touch in different platforms and different mediums? So I've got gears for mobile input, one-touch button on the cardboard or Gear VR, so it's just one button input. Controllers, so like an Xbox 360 controller or an Xbox One or PS4 controller. Gestures with like the Leap Motion or the Daydream with a gyroscope and accelerometer. And tracking with like Vive and Oculus tracking. So there's so many different ways, and there's not exactly a default right now. There's no default way of doing things. But that's quite interesting because that gives a developer, well, a lot of people, a chance to actually write the defaults. I remember back when the iPhone was released, the very first one, the guy stood on stage and held it up, and he slid to unlock it, and everybody lost their minds. I was like, what? How? He slid on a screen to unlock an iPhone, and everyone was like, this is amazing. And look what we do now on every single day on our phone. So yeah, it's pretty obvious now, but it wasn't at the time. So we've got gears. And unfortunately, right now, we don't have eye tracking in the headsets, so we actually have to look exactly in front of us. But how do we know we can actually interact with the objects? So I actually really love the Google Cardboard. A lot of people say, no, it's a poor man's VR tool, it sucks, it's nowhere near as good as the rest. And yeah, it's not as good as a Vive or an Oculus, but it's the most accessible. And we're very picky and elitist as VR developers because it's peasant material, it's just made of paper. But it's the most accessible to 5-year-old kids, to teachers, you can't take a group of 5-year-olds to Egypt. Give them a VR headset, and they can actually see what the pyramids are like, how tall they are. They get the size of presents, and they get the idea of how tall they actually were. So where are we actually looking? Can we interact with the object? And how do we interact with the object? So you imagine I've got this balloon here, just bobbing up and down, and I'm like, oh, I actually want to see, can I do anything to this balloon? How do I do something? So using a reticle. And it might sound basic, but a lot of people actually don't do this. A lot of people just don't include a little dot on their screen. So we're going to have the center focused. Can we actually do something? How do we know we can actually do something? So changing the size or the object color says, yes, you can definitely interact with this object. And then how? How do we do it? So if it's just gaze, then obviously it has to be a length of time. Kind of like how the Kinect was when you hold your hand up and there'd be like a spinning icon saying it's filling up like a meter. So here we go. We've got our reticle, and we're going to look at the object. And straight away, this kind of gives us 2 forms of feedback. Again, it's been interactive. It's a 2-way flow of information. It's telling the player, yes, this thing can be interacted with. It's not just a static thing in the world. We can actually do something here. Again, like I said, it does sound really obvious, but so many people do not do this. So I've got controllers, and controllers are pretty good, but also very bad. So they're familiar to gamers, they're familiar to people who play consoles. They're familiar to me. I can hold an Xbox One controller and tell you what every single button is and press any one on demand. I give that to a general consumer who's maybe never played console games before, and they're very unfamiliar. So it depends how accessible you want that to be. If you're just actually going after console gamers, then yeah, that's great. If I get told I need to press the F key on a keyboard, I could probably find that. But a lot of people could not. So again, it's trying to figure out who is the audience, who is the consumer, and who's actually doing input into your game. So yeah, it's a lot of buttons. Is it exactly immersive? Is it immersive to be sat there in your pants, on your sofa, playing on a controller? It depends. Sit and play. So a lot of games have kind of been transformed from console games, from PC games, into a VR game by just like having like a camera follow the player, or you can look around. And yeah, I think this is like a short-term solution, but I don't think it's anywhere near a long-term solution. I think VR games have to be rewritten completely and thought about how the player can interact from the very start rather than just from a console game. And then we've got gestures, which means a lot of movement, add-ons to hardware. It is a great immersion. I mean, remember when the Wii came out? How amazing was the Wii when you literally got on your shorts and t-shirt with a headband on and started bowling or playing tennis, and you started jumping around. But then after about 3 weeks, you realised you could just sit there on the sofa and just go like this. But you can kind of mix up things. So this one here is a Daydream demo, and they're actually using aiming with gaze, and then they're using the accelerometer of the controller to actually throw the actual device, the boomerang, that's it. We're using the accelerometer here to actually slice through the air. But it actually doesn't matter if you slice up, you slice down, you slice left. It's just getting the speed of the accelerometer. And this is mixed together with the gyroscope. So it's using both things at the same time. So if you move a lot slower, you get the feeling of you actually in control of this sword. But as soon as you start slicing, again, then it just slices anyway. And it's mixing them 2 things up. So the player actually does feel in control, but then again, they're not. But they think they are. So it's how they interpret it. And then we've got tracking. So it's a lot of movement. Different field of view depending on the platform because of the camera systems. It's the best form of immersion, as far as I'm concerned. You've got your actual physical controllers in your hand and haptic feedback. So traditional, like just with a HMD on, you've got 3 degrees of freedom. You're just looking at orientation, where you're looking the scene up, down, left, right. With tracking, depending on the platform, you have so much more freedom. So on the left is kind of what the PSVR would be like, because it's just one camera facing forward, maybe 90 degrees. But that means that you can't actually move around because the controllers are occluded from each other. So if the camera's here and I face here, they can't see this controller. They can see this one, but it's been blocked here. With the Oculus, you've got 2 cameras either side. So again, you've got a bit more field of view. The Vive is full 360. And game developers are actually changing their games depending on the platform. So they're making a form of cross-platform like manager for their game. So Owlchemy Games, who are making Job Simulator, they change their full level depending on the platform is. So for PSVR, their level is just facing forwards, and you can do everything here. For the Oculus, it's a desk that's kind of half round. For a Vive, it's actual full 360. You can move and chuck things in every single direction. But the player actually doesn't realize this unless they happen to play on different platforms. So they scale the world automatically. So yeah, 6 degrees of freedom, orientation and positional tracking in the world. So you can actually move up to things and move around. It's so much fun. So I'm sure a lot of people have seen this picture before. It's a bit gimmicky. But again, it's actually observing people play your game. Don't just send it out to them. Go to a conference. Just set up a thing at like a local developer event. Take the actual experience to them and get them to try it. I mean, I honestly cannot wait until you walk into Marks and Spencer's or Game or John Lewis and see a VR headset up on a display for people to actually try. And that means that you can take your grandma or your mum or your brother or sister or any family member who are skeptical or don't know anything about technology, rather than just at a developer conference or a tech conference. You can take them in and get them to try it and see how they experience it. And again, just think about who the actual consumer is. You have to keep it simple and accessible. And this is why I love the Google Cardboard. It just shows that you can go into a room with 100 people and get them to try it out. And when somebody sees it for the first time and they look around, they're like, wow, that's amazing. The thing they automatically do next is pass it to someone else and, oh, try this, try this, try this. And that's how great it is. So there's there's loads of developing meetups in Brighton where I am. And one guy just brings his Gear VR to the pub and he gets people to buy him a pint and they get to try it. So he ends up absolutely wasted at the end of the night because all these people have come up wanting to try the Gear VR. So you can even take this device to countries where they don't even have electricity, I guess, because it's amazing, accessible, and yeah. So it depends you as a developer if you want to create a full immersive experience or an accessible experience, or both on each side. So if I was working on a Vive game with full 3D positional tracking and things like this, I would also make a smaller, condensed version for people to try out on Cardboard or Gear and make it more accessible so they get even a fraction of what the gameplay is, they can understand, and then they want more from that. So yeah, slow it down. When people get put into a VR experience, they don't just go off straight away. If you get put into Call of Duty and you're like, oh yeah, I know what to do, I'm going to run off and start shooting people. People are put into that situation with HMD on. They just stay still at first and just look around. And things are a lot more interesting. If you just saw this room on a normal game with like Master Chief in it, you'd be like, oh yeah, this is boring, run through the door and blow up some things. If you put them in it with a HMD on, they're going to spend at least a few minutes looking around and seeing things, think, oh, what's this over here? Oh, yeah, cool. Just slow it down the experience and wait for them to be ready to move on, rather than them be forced. And it actually doesn't have to be super, super amazing, wow, these are the best graphics in the world. Even this amazing low poly scene made by Google Cardboard guys as just a small demo. It's pretty amazing. You actually feel like you're in this low poly world with an amazing sunset. And yeah, it's, when you see the trees and walk up to them, you literally just walk up to them and look up because they're that high and tall as you're going through the forest. And it's about how people actually interpret the world and what they think happens in the real world should happen in this virtual world as well. So if you get put into this scene here, you're like, shit, I'm in a big iron outfit, I'm definitely going to war. And giving them that frame of reference so they actually know and see what's going to happen. So yeah, you imagine being into that like scenario where you're putting there. And it also helps with a lot of motion sickness as well, having something in the scene. So instead of just having them like looking around without the helmet on, can cause a lot of motion sickness because the character's moving by himself. Whereas with this, although they can only just see the nose because it's here and above here, it gives them that frame of reference, including things like when you're in a spaceship or an object where you're actually in it. If the object's moving and you're in the object, then again, that frame of reference helps them out a lot, rather than them just flying through the sky. And just think about creating an application where it gives people the imagination to do what they want. So this is Tilt Brush, and my 5-year-old absolutely loves it. I basically just give him one of the controllers, I set the color for him and saying, pull the trigger and draw. And that's the only thing you need to tell somebody. Pull that trigger to draw, and then they can create anything they want in the world. And whatever they feel or interpret, just having that one line to say, that's all you do. But they can do a million things with it. But at the end of the day, it is a game, it's entertainment. So people need to feel some sort of satisfaction when they've played, or they're learning, or after they've achieved something. So this is selfie tennis, and there's like literally no clues what to do at all, except the title. So you're playing tennis, okay. So you've got 2 controllers, and you're like, I'll pull the trigger. All right, so I pull the trigger and a tennis racket appears. Okay, I'm going to play tennis, I've got a tennis racket. I pull the other trigger, a ball appears. Okay, I guess I hit this. And that's because the person has interpreted what the name of the game is, and like, okay, so I'm playing tennis, and this is what I would guess I'm going to do. And then they hit the ball, and then they get transported to the other side of the court, and then they're playing tennis with themselves. And then they're hitting it back and forth. And there's just satisfaction there that the players actually figured that out themselves because they've interpreted the world, and then they're satisfied that they've interpreted the world enough that they've figured out this game all by themselves, and that is the game. But you can literally spend an hour in this game because you can start hitting balls at these people here, you can start hitting balls at, like, everything, yeah. And this is one of the hardest things to do, locomotion. So how people actually move around in the game. And whose first ever VR experience was a roller coaster demo? Yeah? How terrible was that? It was like the worst thing. And that puts a lot of people off. Because you just stare in a static position and this roller coaster is getting zoomed down like these tracks and does a jump. People suddenly falling over. Like the guy actually like literally stand there and hold people so they didn't fall over. And that was a terrible, terrible experience because everyone thought, oh yeah, it's going to be amazing VR roller coaster. No, it definitely wasn't. So people are creating really ingenious ways to actually move around because obviously even in a tracked environment, you've got such a small space. So having a form of teleportation or moving to a point which you select, but without the acceleration and deacceleration, because that's what was causing the nausea and the motion sickness was the acceleration and deacceleration, not just the movement itself. So this example is teleporting. So you can teleport to an area and it gives you the area that you've got in your tracked position. We've got walking in place, so just using the accelerometer of the devices or the controllers. That gets quite tiring really quickly. Or you've got freezing the world as well. So you can literally hold the controllers, turn around while the world stays as it is, let go, and you can walk around again. So you're using the full area of the room. And then things like holospheres, so you're pulling the world towards you. But the best games are using locomotion as a game mechanic. Like selfie tennis, where you hit the ball, and wherever the ball is going to land in 5 seconds, it teleports you there. And an amazing example of this is budget cuts. And you basically fire this thing from your gun, and then a small teleportation window pops up. And this is a stealth game, so you have to literally look around corners and move around. And then you can press it, and it teleports you to that area. Unseen diplomacy. So you've got your area set with the Vive, and you're literally walking around like the center of the area, around different buildings, and you end up going up and up and up. And it feels like you're just walking around and up forever, but you're walking into different areas all the time. So these kind of games that use the locomotion as an actual mechanic have done amazingly well. But you also have to remember that you actually can't actually get fatigued. Making the player fatigued is probably, well, it could be good because it's player satisfaction and people feel as though they've actually worked out and played the game. Or they could be like, holy shit, I'm really knackered and I don't want to play this game ever again. So yeah, it's what do you want the player to do? What do you want the player to feel satisfied after? Do you want them to enjoy this mechanic, or is it too much for them? And then it's also about environmental comfort as well. If they feel comfortable in that world that they are, rather than just shoving them in a zombie game or shoving them in a thing that they wouldn't feel comfortable, or how they should interpret or interact with the world. If a ball is flying at their face, like, are you expecting people to hit it or move out the way or dodge it? Like, it depends how that person has interpreted the environment and what items they have or what controllers they have to feel comfortable there. If you've fired something at their face and they can't block it, and they try to, and if 10 out of 20 people try and block it, then that's something wrong that you're doing in the game, because they feel as though they should have the power to block it. So it's also understanding what the player tries to do in the game and adjusting it to that. A lot of people actually had a lot of problems with clipping. So if they walk to the boundary, or they walk up to an object and put their head through it, what happens? And a lot of people, again, feeling discomfort or feeling very nauseous with that. So a lot of guys done this like clipping effects that kind of turns on the overdraw of the object, but you can still see into it. And these guys actually said it kind of turned into a feature, even though it was a bug, because they can actually look into the mechanics of the world. And a lot of people are also doing it if they've got like a maze game, or if there's something that they're not allowing the player to go into. They turn this on, saying, okay, I get the idea that I'm not supposed to do that. I'll head back out and I'll carry on in my way. One really, really big thing, who's actually tried like a Vive and Oculus, and had problems with this, and span around loads of times, and then like, oh shit, where's the cables? So actually adjusting your gameplay to combat this kind of thing. So we know where the direction the player is facing, we can get all of that information. And the developer can try and prevent, I don't know why this text is different to the rest of okay. The developer can try and prevent the player from entangling the cable and using cues. So even using audio cues. So if they realize that the player is turned right round and about to get strangled by the cable, put an audio cue, like here and here and here. So they're not going to turn around this way because they hear the audio cue and they're following the audio cue around. I mean, not every gameplay can use this trick, but yeah, it's something to think about and again add to the player experience. I think we're a while away from like non-tethered, like high-end VR, but that's a thing to think about as well. This is one of the biggest problems that I've seen when developers are trying to move a non-VR game to VR is UI and understanding what players will read and what players won't read. A lot of people put UI on the controllers of the Oculus or Vive or PSVR, and people don't actually look at them. They know where their hands are. They know what buttons to press. And then they're looking around the world and trying to figure out what to do. And you're like, oh, look at the controllers. Oh, yeah. And then they have to read text on the controllers. So they're like, oh, well, I know my hands are. Why would I look at my hands again? I know where the buttons are because I've been taught which ones shoot, which ones point, which ones interact. So adding UI into the world, or even having no UI at all and making the player interpret what they're meant to do. So I've got world space. We need to consider the depth. So allowing the player to customize the depth of any on-screen UI. So if there's a menu system, for some people, maybe 10 Unity units, it's like 10 meters in the real world, is really great for them. That's like the general optimum, I guess, UI reading distance. But in the options menu, you should be able to change that. You should allow the player to say, actually, this is quite uncomfortable for me. Let me move it closer or further away. Having click or gaze or button interactions with the headset is also good. So yeah, so this is what general game UI would look like. And imagine trying to look down in the different areas or look into the top right corner, kind of like Google Glass was, to see this. It's pretty bad. And no matter how cool Tony Stark looks here, that is just going to be terrible for the gameplay experience. It's far too everywhere in your face. I love using this example from Dead Space that they did years ago. Was basically they had like physical UI in the actual game. So on his back, that was like his health bar, or his ammo like on the actual gun itself. That was really, really nice. And I think that's where a lot of people have gone from there. And again, like I said, having that frame of reference, even this is too much information for the player. They're having to move their eyes everywhere or trying to focus on the screen. So yeah, having that world space UI where the player can actually move and turn around and see things what they choose to. Because that's what happens in the real world. If I want to walk over there and write on that board or read that board, then I have to actually walk over there and look at it. I can't just see it from here. So making the player actually move to that position. And this game, Pamela, does an amazing example of world space UI. You imagine having the controller on your hand and moving the controller up to read what's on the thing. So people can choose when to look at the UI and when not to, rather than it just being constantly in their face. And then a lot of people, a lot of like desktop or a lot of the home screens for the various different platforms are using this kind of method, where it's kind of like a cinema experience. But we feel as though that it should be curved and facing the player. And these are some of our VR examples on the asset store. And using text meshes and actually rotating the text so that the player can see it all the time has been really, really great, and a lot of people use these examples in their games. Because this is the kind of like field of view that the player sees when trying to like read something. You're not trying to read something up here, you're always looking directly at it. But think about having your UI or your inventory or your menu system as part of the world. So this is fantastic contraption, and the cat is your inventory. You can literally pick it up, you can pick up pins, you can pick up balloons, you can pick up wooden sticks and move them around the world, but the cat has all the items. So you can pick up this balloon thing here and attach it. Then you can pick up your roller thing to make this mechanical contraption. And you can even throw the cat off into the distance and it falls forever. It does appear back, don't worry, for all you cat lovers out there. But again, it's a UI, it's not UI, it's a gameplay mechanic has been built in so you don't need UI. So yeah, back to this. I say this so many times, is developers, game developers especially. When I say I talk to so many enterprise and B2B and automotive and architecture developers, I tell them so many times, hire game developers. Game developers are so far ahead of the curve. Game developers can do amazing designs. They can produce amazing artwork. They actually understand what interactivity is, and they can gamify any form of experience. So I'm looking out for you guys. So yeah, so don't be a dick. Nobody wants their first VR experience to be this. So don't go and push somebody in the store when they're trying it out. Because that might be their first ever time trying an experience, and then they're going to be put off forever because they're going to be scared that somebody's going to do that every single time. So yeah, so please, please, please be nice to your players. We are developers, and we spend a lot of time with the HMD on every single day. If I'm making a demo, I maybe spend like 2 or 3 hours a day taking off, putting on the HMD. So I can ignore crazy things that are happening. I can ignore crazy bugs. I'm pretty intolerant now I'm pretty tolerant now to VR. So I was at a conference where they had actually try and make people sick, or they try and make people feel nauseous for science, apparently. And I went on to the highest level and I was fine. It was like, oh, okay, you can tell you do this a lot. I'm like, yeah. So we've gained our VR legs. We're not going to feel crazy. We're not going to feel sick. We know we don't feel immersed because we're trying it every time. So yeah, players are fresh, young, innocent brains. And we are kind of like zombies and going to eat them. So they're expecting it to be real. They want to be in VR. They want to be immersed. So yeah, don't traumatize them like too early. Let them go up and then kind of like push it up further and further as they feel more tolerant. But some people never actually do get acclimatized to it. Some people are just going to be terrible forever, and just give them a nice experience. So yeah, and every single person is different. If you're creating quite a lifelike VR experience, then they know where a door handle is. They know where a light switch is according to their height. So again, give that player a chance to adapt their experience to match theirs. If they're like a 4'3" kid, then let them enter that at their height. Or if they're sitting or standing, or if they're like 8 foot, then yeah, let them be that height in your experience, because they're the one in the experience. It's not just for you, it's for them. Yeah, and they're not all like 25-year-old white males who love tech and look like this. So don't just try it at your studio. Don't just try it with people in your friendship groups, because generally they're going to be like you. They're going to be people who love tech, people who want to try it, people who maybe have similar tolerances or love that kind of gameplay. Take it to different players. Take it to an old ladies like bowls club or a domino class or a yoga class. Like, hey, try this out. So yeah, so VR legs is a real term, by the way, on the Urban Dictionary. So it says, a metaphor describing one's comfort when using a VR headset. So yeah, and this guy's saying, you just haven't got your VR legs. I've modded Skyrim and I only play on the Oculus now. So yeah, so say if we've made a game, we've took it to conferences, we've took it to our mum's wine drinking session and got people to try it. We also need to get some form of analytics. We need to know how actually people are playing it at their own homes. So Unity Analytics have a heat mapping solution where you can actually see where people are spending most time. You can see where they're actually gazing. You can see if you play a sound, you can hit a custom event where they can see if they've actually moved to that sound or they've not heard it or it's not been obvious enough. So getting that form of player information is really key as well. So you can see here the blue areas where they've spent hardly any time at all, yellow areas where they've spent a few seconds, and the red areas where they've got stuck and spent maybe like a minute trying to figure out what to do. So again, that's really important to get that kind of information of how your player is playing the game. You know how to play your game, you've made your game. So it's obvious to you, maybe not obvious to everyone else. Yeah, and so like I spoke about earlier on, image effects in VR. I mean, everybody loves to be like J.J. Abrams and create bloom and crazy flare and everything like that. But some things don't work. So depth of field definitely does not work. Our eyes do that for ourselves, so we literally don't have to do that in the game. Same with lens flare. I mean, you can do 1 or 2, but not 10 at the same time. You're not in Transformers. SSR, at the minute, it's way too expensive. It looks nice, but yeah. People put in a lot of image effects when it's really not needed because they think it looks amazing, it's like a movie. But yeah, you don't need it. Blur, again, our eyes do that ourselves. When we move really quickly, they do that. Yeah, temporal AA, it's a tough one. I'd probably turn it off in most cases because it's a huge expense, especially when you're trying to do 90 frames a second. Bloom's pretty good, and tone mapping. Anything that kind of like Instagrams your scene is pretty good, because everybody loves Instagram, right? All those filters. Or you could just make a game that's like #NoFilter and not use image effects. And vignetting works quite nicely because that's kind of like where our focus is, so we don't really see that much, and it kind of like encompasses, I don't know, I guess what we're meant to see rather than seeing everything happening everywhere. So yeah, so when we actually click virtual reality supported, what can we actually do to optimize our scene? So using VR settings.render skill, this is just an API call to the size of the eye texture. And we can actually change this. So this is kind of like our default, like 960 by 1080. That's kind of what the high-end ones are running. And we can change this render scale to change the size of this texture. And Sony, default is just 1. Sony recommends like around about 1.4. And this gives us, it's pixel to texel ratio. So this gives us a lot clearer rendering in the very central view, because that's where we're going to be looking. We're not going to be looking to the sides. We're not going to be looking anywhere else but mainly the middle. So it gives the middle of the eye a lot better like rendering because yeah. So yeah, it kind of distorts everything else. And yeah, anything less than 1.4 will make it a bit blurry and low res. If you go a bit higher than 1.4, then it does give a cost to performance, but the anti-aliasing like effect gives you a good boost, really. So when people think of VR, they think of like a lone experience. They think of a person sat there in their pants at home, playing, and yeah. But it's actually not, I don't think. I think one of the killer apps for VR is something like this, where everybody has an avatar and everyone can talk to people in a virtual environment, but feels safe doing so. And there's other ways as well. So the majority of the time I play my Vive is when my housemates are around or my friends are around, playing it together and watching that person's experience on another screen, or giving the people who are watching another screen to see rather than just what the person is seeing. So in Job Simulator, you have a camera in the scene that the player can move, and that entertains the audience. So they can see them copying a mug in the scanner, or they can see them throwing a paper aeroplane. They can see them pouring coffee onto their laptop. Rather than what the person sees, they can start playing around and it's entertaining the audience. I was actually on a panel yesterday, the day before, in Kiev, talking about esports and VR, and how VR could potentially be quite big for like directors and people trying to direct a game or an experience, because they have the controllers and they can entertain the audience by choosing what they want to see. So yeah, there's the camera, what the player sees, and they move it around. Kind of like Mario Maker. So when they have cat paws and things like that. Again, it's entertaining the audience. It's not just a lone experience. Think about not just a player, but who is the audience? People might, like I love watching my housemate play on a zombie game because it's hilarious to see them squeal and dodge these zombies flying at them and see what's coming on the screen. Or even think about having input so the players can also maybe have a keyboard and control that virtual world and place zombies in the scene to scare the player. Because it could also be really social. Like the PSVR here. These players are changing things in the game for the person in VR. So yeah, closing. Think about the players, not as you a developer. I think so many people make things because they want to try it or they want to do it. But yeah, think about who it's for. And how accessible do you want it to be? Do you want it to be accessible to school kids and people with just mobile phones with a cardboard? Or do you want it just to be for us elitist, like VR people who can take anything? And are you using all the senses? Are you using audio? Are you using different forms of interactivity and giving the player some feedback of what they're doing? And does it have that initial wow factor? Does it make people just want to stop and look around and just look at the scene and slow it right down? But at the end of the day, you don't have to listen to what I'm talking about because I don't really know anything, because I'm Jon Snow apparently. But yeah, just break everything we know about games. Like I said, game designers, they know nothing now because everything what people thought about games for the last 20 years can completely be rewritten. So that's why so many people are doing VR jams and VR prototypes so quickly and just turning stuff around to see what works, and we're sharing it among like the global gaming and game developer and VR developer community. Because we are in the games industry, it's one of the best things ever to be a game developer, to go to your job every single day and say, hey, I'm making games. When I just meet a general person, like, oh, what do you do? Oh, yeah, I work and I make games and I teach people to make games. Like, wow, that must be amazing. We are literally like in one of the best jobs ever. So it's also about a lot of fun and trying new things. But yeah, thank you very much for listening to me today, and I'm going to be around for the next 2 days. And I hope you create some awesome VR content and experiences, and I'd love to see it, because I have all the devices, so yeah. Is there any questions from the audience, either now or I can meet people outside as well? Anything at all? Yep.
You said you work as an evangelist, right?
Yep.
Do you have any hands-on
Okay, sure. Yeah. So I make technical demos. I make training workshops. So we go into studios and teach them how to do Unity in a day. I do game jams. I write technical blogs. My background is computer science, using a lot of Unity, and visiting studios as well and helping them with their development. So I maybe spend 80% of my time on the road, but a lot of that time is just traveling and working on games in airports, in hotel rooms, going to jams. So like this year I've been to like 5 or 6 game jams. One was on a boat around Norway. One was Global Game Jam with Kennyland, the amazing artist, Acid Jesus. So that game was entered into the Dutch Game Awards. So yeah, I spend so much time developing internally with the rest of the evangelism team, creating lots of demos and creating a lot of VR game content and writing like heat map demos for people to show for all of our marketing material as well. So lots of different things. So evangelist is like the best job ever. Cool. But yeah, I'll be outside if anyone wants to come chat. Grab my card or tweet me or yeah. Thank you very much for listening, guys.